Hard times rarely destroy people overnight. It's not the event itself that keeps you awake at 2 a.m. It's the mental replay, the scenarios, the worst-case endings your mind keeps drafting like a disaster screenwriter that refuses to rest. The message left on read becomes rejection. The financial dip becomes lifelong failure. The silence becomes abandonment. You're not drowning in what is happening. You're drowning in what might happen. And the body doesn't know the difference. Your heart races, your chest tightens, your breath shortens, not because reality is collapsing, but because your imagination is running unchecked. What if your anxiety isn't actually caused by life, but by the way your mind interprets life? What if the real battlefield isn't the economy, the relationship, the diagnosis, or the uncertainty, but the story forming inside your head about those things? The human mind evolved to predict danger. It scans for threats, fills in blanks, prepares for impact. That ability once kept us alive, but in modern life, it often turns against us. It magnifies uncertainty into catastrophe. It confuses possibility with inevitability. And before anything has truly gone wrong, we are already exhausted from fighting shadows. This is where Buddhist philosophy becomes something far more practical than spiritual poetry. It becomes ancient psychology for uncertain times. It doesn't ask you to deny fear. It teaches you to understand it. It doesn't promise to remove hard times. It shows you how to stop multiplying them in your own mind. Because when you learn to see the difference between reality and projection, something shifts. The storm may still exist, but you are no longer adding thunder to it. And that is where real peace begins. Lesson 1. Your mind is a storytelling machine. Your mind does not simply observe reality, it narrates it. Every situation that enters your life is immediately wrapped in a story. That story feels automatic, logical, even urgent. But what most people never realize is this: your brain evolved to predict danger, not to preserve peace. It exaggerates risk to keep you alert. It assumes the worst to keep you prepared. In ancient times, this bias toward threat kept human beings alive. In modern life, it often keeps them anxious. Notice what happens when uncertainty appears. You send a message and the reply doesn't come. Within minutes, your mind starts constructing meaning. They're upset with me. I embarrass myself. This relationship is changing. None of this is confirmed, yet your body reacts as if it is. Or consider job insecurity. A simple meeting request from your manager can trigger a silent internal spiral. I'm about to lose everything. I won't recover from this. This is the beginning of the end. The event is neutral. The narrative is catastrophic. This is called catastrophizing, the mind's habit of stretching a small unknown into a large disaster. Underneath that exaggeration lies identity attachment. The ego is deeply invested in stability, in being seen as competent, secure, valued, in control. When something threatens that identity, even slightly, the mind goes into survival mode. It creates dramatic scenarios, not because they are true, but because it believes preparation equals protection. Even health anxiety follows this pattern. A minor symptom becomes a late-night spiral. The mind searches for certainty and finding none, invents conclusions. It is trying to defend you, but it does so by overwhelming you. Buddhist philosophy offers a powerful shift here. It does not say, stop thinking. It teaches awareness. The moment you recognize, this is my mind telling a story, something changes. You are no longer fused with the narrative. You become the observer. The delayed text becomes a delay, not rejection. The uncertain meeting becomes a conversation, not a collapse. Awareness breaks identification. The stories may still arise, but you are no longer inside them. And when you step outside the story, you begin to step out of unnecessary suffering. Lesson 2. Worry is an attempt to control the uncontrollable. Worry doesn't feel useless when you're inside it. It feels active, responsible, even intelligent. When something uncertain appears in your life, your mind starts running simulations, thinking through every possible outcome, rehearsing conversations, preparing for worst-case scenarios. And in that mental activity, there's a subtle illusion. I'm doing something about this. Worry disguises itself as preparation. It convinces you that if you think hard enough, long enough, intensely enough, you can control what hasn't happened yet. But look closely. Has worry ever truly changed an outcome? Or has it only changed your energy? The reality is that worry drains far more than it delivers. It consumes attention, tightens your body, shortens your breath, and steals your presence. You can spend hours mentally negotiating with a future that may never arrive. And by the time the real moment comes, you're already exhausted. Not from action, but from imagination. Buddhist wisdom invites a more grounded framework: control, influence, and acceptance. First, ask yourself, is this fully within my control? Your actions, your words, your effort, those belong to you. Second, can I influence this, even partially? Perhaps you can communicate clearly, prepare responsibly, or adjust your approach. But the third category is where most suffering hides: what must be accepted. Other people's reactions, economic shifts, the timing of life, the unpredictability of outcomes. When you try to control what belongs in the acceptance category, anxiety multiplies. The practice becomes simple but powerful. When worry arises, pause and sort the situation into these three spaces. Act decisively where you have control. Show up wisely where you have influence. And where neither exists, practice acceptance, not as resignation, but as clarity. Acceptance frees the energy that worry wastes. It redirects your focus from mental struggle to meaningful action. And slowly, you begin to see that peace does not come from controlling everything. It comes from knowing exactly where your control ends and having the strength to let go beyond that line. Lesson 3. The future is a mental construction. The future feels real when you think about it. It feels solid, approaching, almost physical. But in truth, the future is a mental construction. It exists only as images, predictions, and scenarios inside the mind. The human brain is designed to simulate what might happen next. This ability once helped our ancestors survive. By anticipating danger, they increased their chances of protection. The problem is that the brain still runs this simulation constantly, even when there is no immediate threat. When you imagine losing your job, being rejected, getting sick, or failing publicly, your body reacts as if it is happening now. The heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, stress hormones rise. The brain does not clearly separate imagined danger from real danger. To your nervous system, the picture in your mind can feel just as threatening as an actual event, so you suffer twice, first from the imagined future, and then from the stress response triggered by that imagination. This is why simply telling someone to stay present is not enough. The real issue is physiological. Your nervous system is reacting to projections. Buddhist mindfulness becomes powerful here, not as a spiritual escape, but as a form of nervous system regulation. When you bring attention deliberately to your breath, your body, the sounds around you, you interrupt the simulation. You signal safety to your system. You remind your body that in this exact moment, there is no immediate threat. Mindfulness shifts you from imagined time back into lived experience. You notice the chair beneath you, the rhythm of your breathing, the sensation of air moving in and out. These simple anchors ground you in reality rather than projection. Over time, this practice retrains the nervous system. You begin to respond to what is actually happening instead of what might happen. The future will always remain uncertain. But when you understand that it is a mental construction, you stop allowing it to control your present state. And that is where real stability begins. Lesson 4. Discomfort is not a sign you're failing. One of the most painful misunderstandings during hard times is this quiet belief that if you feel lost, uncertain, or uncomfortable, you must be doing something wrong. Modern culture trains you to see discomfort as failure. If your career path becomes unclear, you assume you are falling behind. If a relationship ends, you question your worth. If your confidence shakes, you label yourself weak. But discomfort is not always a signal of collapse. Often, it is a signal of transformation. Hard times rarely hurt only because of the event itself. They hurt because they shake your identity. When a job changes or disappears, it is not just income that feels threatened. It is the identity of being stable, competent, progressing. When a relationship ends, it is not only the loss of a person, it is the collapse of who you believed you were within that connection. The ego builds structures around roles, labels, and expectations. And when those structures crack, it feels like you are cracking with them. This is what can be called ego collapse, not in a dramatic sense, but in a subtle psychological way. The version of you that felt certain, defined, secure, begins to dissolve. And the mind resists that dissolution fiercely. It whispers that something is wrong, that you should already have clarity, that everyone else seems ahead. But from a Buddhist perspective, this collapse is not a punishment. It is an unveiling. It exposes how tightly you are attached to a particular image of yourself. Reinvention rarely feels inspiring while it is happening. There is often an in-between stage that feels uncomfortable and undefined. You are no longer who you were, but you are not yet who you are becoming. This space can feel disorienting. There is no clear identity to stand on, no predictable direction. Yet this in-between stage is where growth quietly takes root. Just as a caterpillar dissolves inside the cocoon before becoming something new, there is a period where the old form must soften before a new one can emerge. Uncertainty during this time is not evidence of failure, it is evidence of movement. Growth is rarely linear. It often feels like confusion before clarity, instability before strength. When you normalize this phase instead of resisting it, something shifts. You stop interpreting discomfort as proof that you are inadequate. Instead, you begin to see it as a natural part of evolution. Buddhist wisdom teaches that identity itself is fluid. There is no fixed self that must remain intact at all costs. When one version of you falls away, space opens for another to form. The discomfort you feel is not the end of your story. It is the middle chapter where transformation happens quietly beneath the surface. Hard times may shake who you think you are, but that shaking is not destruction. It is refinement. And when you allow yourself to move through the in-between without labeling it as failure, you begin to develop a deeper kind of stability. Not the stability of rigid identity, but the stability of adaptability. And that kind of strength cannot be easily broken. Lesson 5. Not every emotion requires action. One of the most misunderstood ideas in emotional growth is the belief that if you feel something strongly, you must immediately act on it. Anger demands expression. Fear demands avoidance. Anxiety demands control. But not every emotion requires action. In fact, many of the regrets people carry were born in moments where emotion moved faster than awareness. There is a crucial difference between reaction and response. A reaction is an emotional discharge. It is immediate, impulsive, and often defensive. It happens when the nervous system is triggered and the body seeks quick relief. A response, on the other hand, is conscious direction. It involves awareness, evaluation, and choice. The emotion is still felt, but it is not allowed to dictate behavior. This distinction is subtle, yet life-changing. Consider an argument. Someone says something sharp, dismissive, or disrespectful. The body tightens instantly. Heat rises in the chest. The mind prepares a counterattack. A reaction would be to fire back immediately, to protect pride, to win the exchange. In that moment, the goal is emotional release, not clarity. But if you pause, even for a few seconds, something powerful happens. You interrupt the automatic loop. The pause gives space for reflection. Is this worth escalating? Is there a deeper issue beneath the tone? That small gap between feeling and speaking transforms the outcome. Instead of damaging the relationship, you steer it. Criticism works the same way. When someone points out a flaw or mistake, the ego feels threatened. Reaction pushes you to defend, justify, or shut down. But a response asks a different question. Is there truth here that can help me grow? By pausing, you separate the discomfort of being corrected from the opportunity to improve. The pause prevents identity from hijacking the situation. Financial stress is another powerful trigger. A sudden expense, market uncertainty, or job instability can generate fear quickly. Reaction might lead to panic decisions, harsh conversations, or catastrophic thinking. But response begins with regulation, slow breathing, clear assessment, identifying what is actually within your control. The pause allows the mind to move from fear-driven action to strategic planning. The reason the pause creates power is biological as well as philosophical. When triggered, the emotional brain activates faster than the rational brain. Without interruption, instinct dominates. But when you slow down intentionally, you allow higher reasoning to re-engage. You reclaim leadership over your own behavior. Buddhist philosophy emphasizes awareness not as suppression, but as mastery. Emotions are not enemies. They are signals. Anger may signal boundaries. Fear may signal caution. Sadness may signal loss. But a signal is not a command. When you learn to feel fully without acting instantly, you conserve energy, protect relationships, and make wiser decisions. Over time, this practice builds quiet confidence. You no longer feel controlled by every surge of emotion. You recognize that strength is not in intensity, but in direction. Not every emotion deserves action, but every emotion deserves awareness. And in that awareness, you gain the freedom to choose your next move deliberately rather than impulsively. That is real power. Lesson 6. Your suffering increases when you personalize everything. One of the quiet habits that intensifies suffering is personalization. Something happens, and almost instantly the mind makes it about you. A friend seems distant, and the thought appears that they are pulling away because of something you did. A colleague walks past without greeting you, and the conclusion forms that you are being disrespected. A plan falls apart, and the inner voice declares that life is targeting you specifically. The event itself may be neutral or incomplete, but the meaning added to it transforms it into a wound. This is the ego at work. The ego organizes experience around a central character, and that character is you. Every glance, delay, inconvenience, or mistake is filtered through a personal lens. The mind does not simply register events, it interprets them. It asks what this says about your worth, your future, your identity. The more tightly attached you are to a particular image of yourself, the more sensitive you become to anything that seems to threaten it. When someone does not respond quickly, the mind does not stop at the simple fact of delay. It moves toward narrative. They are ignoring me. I must have upset them. I am not important enough. When financial hardship appears, it can evolve into the belief that you are unlucky or cursed. When repeated setbacks occur, the story deepens into the idea that life is unfair, specifically toward you. These interpretations feel convincing because they arise automatically. But they are interpretations, not facts. Buddhist philosophy offers a deeper insight here. Events are events. Meaning is added later. The raw experience comes first. The story follows. Most suffering does not originate in the event itself, but in the interpretation layered on top of it. Two people can experience the same setback and respond in entirely different ways. One sees it as humiliation. The other sees it as redirection. The external circumstance is identical. The internal meaning creates the difference in suffering. Personalization narrows perception. It assumes intention where there may be none. It assumes permanence where there is only change. It assumes judgment where there may be distraction, misunderstanding, or simple randomness. By placing yourself at the center of every negative occurrence, you amplify emotional pain. You turn neutral events into personal attacks. The shift begins with awareness. When something triggers you, pause and separate the event from the interpretation. What actually happened? A message was not returned. A project was declined. A stranger looked away. That is the event. Now notice the meaning your mind wants to assign. They dislike me. I am failing. This always happens to me. When you see that meaning is constructed, you create space between reality and narrative. This does not mean denying hurt or pretending indifference. It means recognizing that the ego tends to personalize what is often impersonal. Many events in life are not about you at all. They are about circumstances, timing, other people's struggles, or natural change. When you loosen the habit of personalization, emotional intensity decreases. You respond to what is real instead of reacting to imagined judgment. Over time, this practice cultivates humility and freedom. You stop viewing yourself as the constant target of negative forces. You begin to see life as a flow of events rather than a sequence of personal evaluations. The less you personalize, the less you suffer. And in that release, you experience a quieter, steadier form of peace. Lesson 7. Inner stability is built through micro-trust. When people hear the word faith, they often imagine something abstract or distant, something grand and spiritual. But inner stability is not built on dramatic declarations. It is built quietly, through micro-trust. Small, repeated decisions to believe that you can handle what is in front of you, even if you cannot control what comes next. Hard times shake stability because they expose uncertainty. The mind searches for guarantees. It wants proof that everything will work out exactly as planned. When that proof does not appear, anxiety fills the gap. But stability does not come from certainty. It comes from trust. Not blind optimism, but grounded trust in three realities: impermanence, adaptability, and past resilience. First, trust in impermanence. Every emotional state you have ever experienced has changed. Every crisis, no matter how intense, eventually shifted. Even the most painful chapters in your life did not remain frozen in time. Impermanence is not just a philosophical idea. It is observable truth. Your moods change. Your circumstances evolve. Your relationships grow or transform. When you internalize this deeply, you begin to understand that the anxiety you feel now is not permanent. The uncertainty you face is not fixed. Stability grows when you remind yourself that this moment, like every other, will move. Second, trust in your adaptability. Human beings are far more flexible than they believe. You have adjusted to changes before that once felt impossible. You have learned new skills, survived disappointments, and navigated unexpected shifts. Adaptability is not loud. It often operates quietly in the background. You adjust your routine. You rethink your plans. You recalibrate your expectations. Yet when fear rises, the mind temporarily forgets this capacity. It assumes fragility instead of flexibility. Micro-trust means reminding yourself that even if circumstances change, you will adjust again. You may not know how yet, but you have done it before. Third, trust in your past resilience. Look honestly at your history. There were moments when you thought you would not recover, situations that felt overwhelming, conversations that left you shaken, yet you are still here. You found a way through, perhaps not perfectly, perhaps not gracefully, but you moved forward. That evidence matters. Stability strengthens when you actively recall your own resilience. Instead of asking whether you will survive this challenge, remember that you have already survived others. Micro-trust is built through small practices. When anxiety rises, instead of demanding certainty, you take one steady breath and trust that you can handle the next minute. When a setback occurs, instead of spiraling into catastrophic thinking, you focus on one practical step and trust that clarity will build gradually. Each small act of grounded trust reinforces your nervous system. It signals that panic is not required. This is not denial of difficulty. It is recognition of capacity. Inner stability does not mean life becomes predictable. It means you stop needing it to be predictable in order to remain steady. You understand that change is natural, that adaptation is possible, and that resilience has already been proven in your own experience. Over time, micro-trust compounds. What once triggered intense fear now feels manageable. What once destabilized you now feels like part of the process. Stability becomes less about external control and more about internal confidence. Not confidence that nothing will go wrong, but confidence that whatever unfolds, you will meet it with awareness, flexibility, and strength. And that kind of stability cannot be easily shaken. One day, uncertainty will visit you again. It always does. Another unexpected message, another delay, another shift you didn't plan for. But next time, it won't meet the same version of you. It won't meet the mind that immediately believes every fearful thought. It won't meet the impulse that reacts without pause. It won't meet the imagination that runs 10 steps ahead into disaster. It will meet someone more aware, someone who questions the first story the mind tells, someone who understands that a thought is not a prophecy, that a feeling is not a command, that discomfort is not danger. The new version of you pauses, not because you are passive, but because you are powerful. You no longer chase imaginary futures as if they are happening now. You recognize projection when it begins. You feel anxiety without surrendering to it. You sort what you can control from what you must accept. You stop personalizing every inconvenience. You allow identity to evolve instead of defending it at all costs. And most importantly, you trust your ability to adapt. You have seen impermanence. You have survived before. You know that uncertainty is not the enemy. Unconscious reaction is. Hard times do not disappear. Life will still change. People will still disappoint. Plans will still shift. But the version of you that panicked at every shadow, that believed every catastrophic narrative, that treated discomfort like collapse, that version slowly dissolves. In its place stands someone steadier, someone clearer, someone who understands their own mind. If this helped you see your mind differently, stay with this channel. We do not escape life here. We learn to understand it.